Good evening, everybody. This is Patti from the Hydrated Life and Morning Strength. And tonight I'm here with Faith Allison Mascato. And we are going to be talking about healing emotional wounds, specifically the father wound. And I met Faith 12 years ago up in New York, and she helped me immensely with this wound. So I have asked her tonight to join us so that we can discuss how to overcome the father wound when we carry it with us. And to give you a little bit about her, she's a spiritual trauma therapist, an author of the book Unnormal, and it's available on Amazon. And just an all-around awesome lady. I started out counseling with her, and now we're friends today. And I'm constantly grateful for all the work she's helped me do to overcome all of the wounds that I've had in my life. So welcome, Faith.
Hey, Patti. So my friend Patti is also an author. I'm going to introduce you. And actually getting ready to publish her second book, which she may or may not share with you. And as an amazing woman who is always growing and learning and gaining insight on the human condition. Physically, she's one of the best massage therapists you would ever be blessed to have a massage from. And partly because she's so intuitive about the human body, and then also very curious and intuitive about the human soul and spirit. And so she's an amazing person, a great listener, a great friend, and someone that is really, really mean when she beats you at Rummy Cup.
I wouldn't call that mean.
If you're doing video on that, well, depends on if you like losing or not. She does a lot of victory dances when she wins.
There you go. Victory dances. But yeah, so one of the things, in my healing journey, I had trauma early on in my life since I was a little girl. And a lot of it stemmed from my father, which I didn't even know about a father wound until I started working with you. And, one of the biggest things that affected my life was him not coming to any of my sporting events. He was very much the woman belonged in the home to take care of the men, and he wouldn't drive 1 mile up the road, even though I was a phenomenal athlete. He never came to a softball game, basketball game, volleyball game, or softball game throughout my entire career. He actually wasn't there for any events that I've done in my life other than my high school graduation. And that wound deeply hurt me. He would travel hours to go see my brother play, but he wouldn't travel 1 mile for me. And it really affected how I see men today. And he didn't teach us what we needed to be taught in life. I noticed that he had a lot of fear in his life. So maybe you can describe what the father wound is, Faith, and the definition and the impact of it for us to start out with. And then we can get more into my healing journey, your healing journey, and, how you help women today overcome it.
Well, fathers are really crucial, and it's probably worth saying that this is part 2 of a 3-part series that we've been doing together. And we covered the mother wound and, the place of a mother in our life and what that develops. And I won't go over that. You can look back on the feed and find that. But a father's presence normally really has an impact on our sense of identity and our sense of security. When that nurturing connection with a father figure is missing or conflicted, either missing or it was that you did have a father that was present but absent in fatherhood, for whatever reason, a father wound can form, and that's a phrase that we in today's world have shaped, to give some sense of understanding to, you have to have a dad. And if you don't have a dad, it actually shapes you. The absence of a father is a very life shaping thing. And the presence of a harsh father, or a father who is physically present but absent emotionally, is equally complicated, as I said, and creates a lot of conflict in the life of a child. And for women, we're focusing on women today. Um, a father who is emotionally absent, or neglectful, or really harsh, as my father was, creates this kind of awful sense for a woman of looking for affirmation, as a bad country song would say, looking for love in all the wrong places.
Yeah.
Constantly there's something in a woman, that was meant to look up at her father in his face and see someone who is strong and who feels responsible for her, begin to affirm her and to bless her and to help her understand who she is and even who she is not. And so, that sense of identity, and the affirmation that we really look for in terms of our identity forming. The first place we look for that in our lives is really from our fathers. Mothers do that in a very different way, in a
Yeah.
nurturing way, in a comforting way, in a teaching way. Fathers model safety and provision, protection, provision, and identity in a child.
Yeah. My dad, his watching him when we had moved from Sequoia to Chadwick's, and in that 5 mile move, it was in December, and he was a roofer, siding, and then snowplowed in the winter. And that winter we moved in right after Christmas, the first of the year, and like 2 3 weeks later he broke his legs snowmobiling, so he couldn't provide for us. And you could see the fear in him, and that was really a changing point for him. He sold off all of our snowmobiles shortly after, and kind of created these fears inside of him of not being enough later on in life. And we had really good memories when we were little, or I should say I don't want to say we, I don't want to speak for my kids. He made really good memories for us as children. We'd get up at 2 a.m. and watch the guppies be born in the fish tanks. Friday night popcorn or ice cream. We would play cards or games on a card table that we had. And then something shifted when we moved. We had no direction. We had to call him and my mother at the bar to bring us food if they were coming home to feed us. I don't know if it was the proximity of the house to the bar, but the financial provision, he never taught us how to do that. And he didn't bring in a lot of money. He brought in enough,
Mm-hmm.
And I know that affected all of us because we didn't have the discipline that a father should have. It was, he didn't really discipline us when we were younger.
Mm-hmm.
So that provision, I think, is huge. The affirmation and the identity, I can see it in other siblings. If they're listening to this ever, this is all my viewpoint from me being raised. And, so, but I can see it. I can see the hurt in some of my siblings due to the lack of things, that he wasn't this father that truly provided and affirmed us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's a direct correlation, between the things that a father and your relationship with your father is meant to do that we mentioned earlier, and then the symptomology of what you struggle with in life. So typically people that have a home where the father, either like you said, maybe he lost a job, or he couldn't keep a job, or he had a job that didn't provide for the whole family. So there was always this constant sense of will we have enough? Where where is our next meal coming from? Or will I be able to go to college one day? How will I figure that out? If it doesn't have, I'm not saying that a parent has to be able to pay for college, but they should
Right.
be able to teach a child how to save and how to
Right.
work their way through college, you know? So there's all these like life lessons that you learn around provision from a parent. And like I said, you know, single moms have to, you know, they bear the weight of teaching that, but a father, when he does it, there's a way that men carry that that's so strong and so secure, and when that's challenged in them, their children feel the challenge of it. And so, you know, in church language, I'm a pastor, so we have this thing we talk about, a poverty mindset, which just means you have a really unhealthy relationship with money. You can have a lot of money and be afraid of losing it. You can have no money and be afraid of having it. You know, you just have this really unhealthy, unclear sense of the purpose of money and how to get it and how to keep it and what to do with it, how to save it. And then, you know, alongside of that, a lot of fear and anxiety around that. Also, it is not uncommon for people who have struggled, you know, with a father wound to have a sense of low self-esteem and you know, an unclear sense of boundaries and ways of helping to keep themselves safe. So they often have habits, like, you know, obsessive disorders around how to keep themselves safe or how to make life safe, controlling habits, being overbearing, overly mindful of your surroundings or the way things are around you. And, you know, it's a lot to, um, it's a lot to come to the knowledge in your life that you are not necessarily, you know, the source, the root source of these maybe bad habits that maybe you're even taking medication to try to control, or you're not exactly the source of necessarily this really unhealthy relationship you have with money.
Yep.
Potentially, the things that happen with you in your family of origin have deeply shaped you, um, or in some ways left you just unable to develop. If you think of a development in a life cycle of a human being, you know, if we saw someone who's, you know, had one arm that was strong and the other arm was like a string bean hanging at their side, we'd say, wow, something happened to that arm. It's undeveloped. You
Yes.
know, sometimes things in our lives, emotionally, intellectually, um, are just undeveloped and deeply impact our relationship with ourselves and our ability to do relationship with others. In
Yes.
my life, my father, I shared this in the mother wound. When my mother died when I was born, my father was left with a lot of responsibility, in a job that, you know, he worked away from home quite a bit. You know, I was sent to live with someone, and my sisters, you know, my older sister had to actually take care of my younger sister and make decisions that she wasn't necessarily feeling prepared to make. And so that was difficult for her. And at the same time, you know, my father eventually, because of circumstances in life, he remarried and he had more children. And I was the kid that got lost in the middle. I was eventually brought home, placed back into the family. My stepmother had more children. And it wasn't until I was probably in my 40s, approaching my 50s, that I went to a family reunion and met a woman who was my mother's best friend and cousin, actually. And you know, she saw me and she spent the day with me. She cried when she saw me because I looked so much like my mother.
Yeah.
And she spent the day with me, and it helped me. Like, I really understood that day that to see me for my father had to be a problem. I presented, you know, potentially one of the worst times of his life. And I believe, you know, my siblings may disagree with me on this, but I believe that when my father looked at me, he subconsciously blamed me for my mother's death. And that meant that my father never told me he loved me. Most of the time, he was angry with me or irritated with me or ignored me. I prayed for him to ignore me. His punishments were particularly cruel and a little twisty, harsh. I have a younger sister that has a very different relationship with my father.
Yeah.
She was the youngest in the family, born from my stepmother. She misses my father. She burns toast on his birthday every year and to remember him and cries all day. And, I don't say this to hurt my siblings, but most of my life, once my father was gone, I was grateful he couldn't hurt me anymore.
Yeah.
And, so the impact of that in my life, not only was I like loaded with a lifetime of negativity and bad messages and disappointment, and he refused to forgive me when he was dying. He told me he couldn't forgive me and wasn't sure that I was going to go where he was headed, and that he'd never see me again because I had done such bad things. God might not accept me. And he just was, to the end of his life, had a hard time seeing me.
Yep.
And so I had, most of my life, have had a hard time seeing myself and valuing myself. And when I became, what I would say, when I really became a Christian, which is I came into relationship with God, I received Jesus as my Savior. I received God as a Father. I began to find that Jesus was my big brother and that potentially I was part of this family that was amazing. When that happened for me, I really struggled with the idea of God as a good father. And I remember when that song, Good, Good Father, came out years
Yeah.
into my Christianity. I remember sitting in a conference and somebody singing it, and it hit me that if I was going to receive God as a good father, I was going to have to break up with this belief that I had that all fathers were bad,
Yeah.
and that and all fathers were not to be trusted. And that was a pivotal moment in my life. And it wasn't until I could forgive my father, which my father never asked me to forgive him. I didn't forgive him because he asked me to. I released him from my life. I released the things that he had done wrong, the things he hadn't done. There were a lot of things he could have done that he didn't do, that I didn't receive. I had to release it. And I had to just allow that space to become open in my life, to begin to understand that there was goodness and kindness and compassion and love and tenderness, that a father would have towards me, and even that a spiritual father or a man would have towards me. I think it's important to talk about how this type of wound affects our relationship with men. Why don't you
Yes.
get into that?
Yeah. For me, I can see, throughout my whole life, I never had I could pretty much let guys walk all over me in the sense that I really just slept with them, right? I'd get drunk and sleep with them. There was no relationship there. You know, Dylan's father, we never celebrated any holidays. We never went out to dinner. We never called each other. We never, we just met up at the bar every other weekend and slept together
Mm-hmm.
until Dylan was born. And so I personally have never been in a relationship with someone who's loved me like that. And in seeking that, right? Like when we were working together, I remember when I moved down here, I found a picture of my father with his arms around me when I had cancer, and it was his 70th birthday. And I printed that out and put it on my wall. And it's the only picture I ever have that I have in any of my pictures of his arms wrapped around me. Now, when he passed away, we loved each other, but I had overcome the wounds working with you. I had started that process. And but early on, I remember one night when I was 13 years old and I had some trauma happen, got drunk and had sex and all that kind of stuff. And my mom, I always kissed my mom goodnight. And that night I tried to sneak by and they found me drunk. They didn't know what happened. And my dad ran past me. Instead of holding me and hugging me, and saying it's going to be okay, he ran past me asking where my brother was. And that hurt me.
Yeah.
And then when I was...
What kind of message did that instill in you?
That I wasn't worth anything to him. Like I was just invisible my whole life to him, basically. And until later on, when I had Dylan, really, when I had Dylan, things started to change. And it set a precedent for how I saw guys. And when I look back on it, I come from a lineage of alcoholism. My grandfather, my dad's father wasn't around. We never met him. So we didn't have a grandfather on that side. And then on my mother's side, my grandfather was a drunk. So you walked into his home and it was, here's you want a cigarette or a drink, and he just sat there. There really was no life other than that of him.
Mm-hmm.
And I see that in, a lot of my uncles and in my cousins and stuff like that we don't know how to relate together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the, there's 3 words I would use that are significant in how we do relationship. One is isolating. People can be very given to isolation or layers of protection before you actually get to who they really are. Sedating. So there's a lot of compensating for, fear and anxiety and a lot of, like I said, obsessive disorders, obsessing about things. So isolating, sedating, or comforting, and then overcompensating. So overworking for affirmation, overcompensating for failure, or for, working too hard, trying too hard, always looking for that affirmation, looking for that verbal, yeah, you did it, good job,
Yep.
Do you know that children really need that? I think it's important to say maybe you didn't have a good parent that showed you how to be a good parent and you're figuring it out and you're listening to this going, oh my Lord, I don't do that. And I've struggled with that. And I have layers of protection, even from my kids. One of the sweetest, most powerful things that a father can do for his child is to touch them and see them, to put your hand on their face or on their shoulder, to look them, to lift their chin and look them in the eyes, to tell them the good things they did. If your ratio of all the bad things they've done and correcting them is much higher than the affirmation of the good things, and I see you, and yes, I know you. Yeah, that was you. That was you really. That was you doing really good. If the ratio's off, adjust it.
Yeah.
Correct it. There's a saying in the physical healing world that for every day you spend in bed sick when you get the flu, it takes a week for your body to recover. I don't know if you've ever heard that.
Oh, wow, no.
So it takes you a while to get back to quote unquote normal. One word of affirmation can put out years of misery. If you're a teacher or you work with children, if you have the opportunity to speak into a young person's life, don't just think it in your head, say it out of your mouth, because God may be using you to heal someone's father wound. And it's not ratio to ratio, word to word. One affirmation can heal years of misery, of self-doubt and anxiety about their identity.
Yep.
So it's important.
Very. I notice in some of the men that I do know, for some reason, they're much better with their grandchildren than they are with their own daughters, specifically, even sons. But, mostly I'm talking about daughters with this. And I always wondered why.
Mm-hmm. Do you know why? Like, what do
No,
you think?
no,
You know, I think when we're younger, we're closer to our pain. We're working it out within ourselves.
oh,
And when we get older, we've resolved some of that, whether someone loved us. You know, I say this all the time, we get hurt by people in life,
no,
and God uses people as part of his healing prescription.
okay,
So, you know, sometimes, like I said, someone has spoken into you or you've fallen in love. You know, a man has fallen in love with a woman that has helped him heal and resolve some of his pain or modeled love back to him, and then they grow, you know, their kids grow, they have regrets sometimes about how they parented their kids. And so, you know, maybe they have a percentage of it is, I want to do better with my grandkids, but honestly, a part of it is also the fact that they have more peace. They have more resolve within themselves, resolution within themselves. They have more of a sense of identity. And so when they reach towards that child, they're not, you know, a bundle of anxiety and fear and anger and frustration and irritation. And they're actually a person that has come home to themselves. And when they touch that child, they're actually giving out of a sense of overflow, and you can see it, you can see the difference.
oh, huge. I can, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I can think of two gentlemen in particular. They're not related to me,
Mm-hmm.
but I was shocked. Like, they couldn't stand their kids, basically.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't ever say anything nice about them. And then they had grandkids, and it was like a 180. And I was like, wow, you know, I don't know.
Yeah,
So, what are some ways that we can learn to overcome this
let me
wound?
let me just go back to that situation one moment, because that may speak to somebody here. One of the things I know that happens in those situations is sometimes the parent of the child, the one that wasn't loved, the one that wasn't affirmed, the one that experienced the other dad, you know, it can be very difficult for them to see their father give their child something they never got themselves.
Oh, wow.
And, you know, they can secretly struggle with that, or even, you know, say things about it, you know, really, it can create tension between the grandparent and the parent. The child's joyfully ambivalent to the whole thing, or
Yeah,
clueless at least. But then they do sometimes feel the tension between the adults, you know.
yeah,
And here's the thing, they're going to internalize it and know that they're the problem. But in reality, they're not the problem. It's the unresolved issues between the grandparent and the parent. And so if that speaks to somebody that's watching this tonight, it is never too late to have a conversation and to say the things you should have said. And you might say, well, I'm going to be too mean. It's going to be too ugly. They're not the same person they were. They don't need to hear that stuff. No, it's okay to, what I say is write it down, write a letter to them. You don't have to send a letter. Start with writing a letter, write a letter, say all the things that you would like to say about how you felt. And then put the letter in a drawer and give yourself a few days, and then go back and read the letter and see if you feel any differently. Sometimes just getting the words out and having the freedom to say whatever you want to say helps you to find the words you actually need to say.
yeah.
And I'm going to say it again, it's never too late to say to someone, you hurt me when you did that. When you did that, it hurt me. I felt this way. And they may say, well, I didn't mean it, and I was hurting. And then you have to hear them, because that's the other side of it. You're looking at a person who was probably in a lot of pain themselves when they did those things. And yes, they may have resolved it, and they may be a better person or a more whole person today, you know, and be able to be a great grandparent because of that. But it doesn't mean they can't have a conversation with you that brings resolution to what happened in the past. And it's worth it, because the whole entire family system is now letting go of agreements they have made with the past, which only allows those agreements to have the potential to show up in the future.
Wow.
It's good to resolve those things.
Yeah. And
So,
that comes from learning good communication.
mm-hmm,
By me joining me coming to God and Christ and going to church, and the church teaching how to communicate through some of their programs. It really helped me confront the things that held me back that I would never say. I'd rather go have a drink than be able to speak sober to somebody. And it was so beneficial to me to learn that skill.
Every conversation you choose not to have, that you need to have, which means now you've swallowed it, you've only had it with yourself, is a starting point of disease.
Yeah.
And I'm not just saying that and talking out of my butt. Science has actually proven it.
Oh, I'm living proof of it. I hated myself for 37 years and it caused breast cancer. And, all that negative internal stuff, when because you've helped me through it, blaming myself and you telling me that it wasn't me, it wasn't all on me. It was, other people had parts to play in it.
Yeah.
And then once I could see that, then I could work through it more and more. Is it easy? No. But is it worth it? Yes.
Yeah.
I really don't feel I was a mature woman until I was 50 something years old, 50, 55 years old.
Yeah. There's a handout, a PDF that we'll put up tonight with the broadcast in the comments, and you'll be able to do some of this work. But it's interesting. One of the questions, it's a journaling prompt. It says, is there any place in your life where you are living small because you felt unsafe?
Yep.
And I think that's a big statement. I think a lot of people are living small in places that they can control and they can manage.
Yep.
Where they have a plan in case it goes bad. And, trauma causes us, childhood difficulties and challenges cause us to live waiting for the other shoe to drop. Something bad is possibly going to happen. And, it may not last. It may not be safe. It may not, just this awful feeling of waiting for bad. And God wants, God is so good that he doesn't want you to accept that. And he wants to show up in that place where it's scary to let down those walls and to let people in, to believe that you can forgive someone and let them go and release them. And that you can not only let them go, but you can open up that space in your life to a living relationship with God, to a vibrant, conversational, back and forth discussion, with him and then with other people. That you would let people into the parts about yourself you still don't know about, aren't sure about, and that you would share the spaces you're proud of, with people openly and in a way that is a matter of stewardship. If it's really, here's the thing, if something's really beautiful and important about you, you don't necessarily share that with everybody.
Yeah.
Not because you feel unsafe, but because you recognize that other people feel unsafe. And they may not be able to handle that part of you.
Yeah.
And so we're not, what does that mean? We're not willing to shrink ourselves, not willing to accept a smaller life to make other people more comfortable around us.
Yeah.
So, there's journaling work that you can do that really helps you get words that are on the inside out of you. If you don't like to write, you can do the 2-chair exercise where you put 2 chairs in a room facing each other and you have the conversation, with the other person. And then you sit in the other chair and you have the conversation and let them say, back to you, what you need to hear. What did you need to hear? What did the bad father say? And what does a good father say? I would like to think that you don't just know it's bad because it hurt you, but because you've heard other versions of good fatherhood, of good voices, of wholesome voices that don't tear you down. There's, along with journaling or the 2-chair work, there's also I put in some protector visualizations. Like I said, if you had a dad that was really scary, oh my goodness. I can't describe, I don't feel it the same way anymore. There's, I don't feel, God has so healed me of that fear. I don't feel it the same way, but I can remember the girl I was that was, listen, I always had like an antenna up for the sound of my father's voice or body coming close because it might bring with it pain, or it might bring with it words. Um, it might bring with it shame. And so learning how to acclimate yourself to the presence of someone who is actually not there to hurt you and not there to harm you, but there to protect you, to cover you, to provide for you. I've had to work really, really hard on the idea of provision in my life.
Yeah.
That I have a good father that wants to take care of me. He doesn't enjoy leaving me in the food stamp line, with $1 left, or, he's not rubbing his hands going, oh, she did bad. I can't wait for her to suffer, and that is the perspective that a lot of people have of God and in general of men, just a great distrust for women when they've had these kinds of wounds. You know, it almost sounds like when I said that, I'm thinking, it almost sounds like we're talking about sexual abuse, but you can have a dad that never sexually abused you, but hurt you in very deep ways.
Yeah.
And you can have the absence of a father. Maybe you grew up in a single mother's, home, and no men, to pour into you, to cover you, to protect you, to model, what's good and trustworthy and loyal and faithful to you. The absence of those things, I want you to remember, means that you have something undeveloped in your life. So how do you know to trust? Stop blaming yourself for not trusting and learn how to trust good people.
Yep.
Learn that you actually were created. God created you to trust yourself. God created you to trust him. And guess what? He trusts you even when you don't trust yourself.
Yep.
He knows how he designed you. He knows how good you are. And he wants you to know that too. And then, the last thing is allowing the space that you have in your life where your mind, the mental calculations that we go, like beginning to be aware of those, beginning to dialogue. What does the inner critic in your voice in your head sound like? And how can you flip that script? Once you become aware of the shadow conversation that's happening in you and behind you, you can begin to have that conversation in healthy and holistic ways. But you have to actually acknowledge that you have an inner dialogue that's hurting you.
Yes.
And it's not trustworthy. It's not there to help you. It might say it's there to save you, to keep you safe, to keep you from being harmed, but it's also stealing life from you.
Yeah. And many of us don't even realize that we have a father wound. Mm. And it's until we hear about it. So I'm hoping more women will hear about it so they can heal. Because like you said, isolation, we blame ourselves. What's wrong with me? Why can't I have friends? Why can't I, find a soulmate that's a male that that loves me the way I want to be loved? I remember when I came down here, I signed up for a dating program, and the very first person that they picked for me was my father. I was sitting across from this gentleman, and everything we talked about, I just sat there and said, they picked my father. So what did I describe of what I was looking for? Right?
Yeah. Yeah. We're subconsciously looking for the attributes of the man. And sometimes, women can be guilty of trying to resolve or fix, so it's like we choose another person that we can get a redo on, because, maybe as a child, children are naturally narcissistic. So they're very self-oriented because they're kids and they're born that way. And then what happens is when they get hurt, they often, because they don't have the executive function to process all the layers of it's not my problem, it's not my fault, they'll actually take responsibility for what's wrong in the home.
Yep.
And so, what's wrong with me that they're doing this? Or what's wrong with me that my dad doesn't love me? I hear that in your story. Why don't I measure up, And as soon as you take responsibility for that, it then becomes yours to resolve. And
Yeah.
so every relationship becomes one more opportunity to redo. I'm going to fix my dad. I'm going to fix my relationship with my dad. But in reality, you have to just acknowledge it was broken. It did not give you what you need. It gave you some unholy gifts, and you
Yep.
need to release those unholy gifts through prayers of release, or I call them breakup prayers. I just break up with that.
Yes.
It's not mine. It never was mine. It came from his brokenness, and I just release it, and ask God to help you and to flood that place with light, to turn the lights on inside of you so you can see the emptiness, and then begin to fill that with new ways of seeing and thinking and being in that space, so that when you have a relationship, you're not trying to fix anything. You're
Right.
actually showing up as you, and you're allowing someone else to show up as them. You're not allowing what they do to trigger you and go and then blame them, and, well, you did this, I felt like this. Well, they're just being them, and if them being them creates conflict in you because of your past, that's not their problem, that's yours. You
Right.
have to own that.
Yep.
And we ought not to be in dating relationships, certainly not marriage relationships, with people that we're just trying to resolve our wounds with our father. And if you got into a relationship because of that, and you're in it and you're stuck, you need help. You need good marriage counseling. It's not irretrievable. I'd like to believe there are things outside of that dysfunction that are very beautiful and very good and wholesome and friendship oriented and attractional, but you have to deal with those places where your unhealthiness is now striking the unhealthiness in someone else, or them just being them is causing you to be triggered, and you're holding them hostage to your father wound.
Right. So, how can people reach out to you if they would like to seek further help?
So to get a hold of me, I have a website, faithallison.com, that has a whole page for my counseling practice, Intersections for Healing. You can also email me at intersections with an S on the end of it, like an intersection in a road, intersections for healing at gmail.com. And you can reach out to me on Facebook, Instagram. I'm pretty much everywhere. And then to get a hold of me, to make an appointment, you would call 315-657-2700, and set up a time to meet with me. And, I do consultations. If you're not sure about counseling, I do a free 15-minute consultation, which just kind of helps you hear expectations, get a little bit about me, how much it costs, and is this something that I can get into? And I'm comfortable with doing that. And you say, I don't think I can afford that, or that's way too much for me, or my spouse isn't ready for counseling yet, and I want to wait for them. And at the end of that 15 minutes, you owe me nothing.
Yep.
So sometimes you just need to look at the possibilities. If you can't do that and you don't have that opportunity, I say look for locally a good church that cares about people. It's
Yeah.
not about the size of the church. It's not about how big it is, how small it is. When you walk in, do people actually see you? Do they remember your name? Can you sit next to them in your brokenness? Can you sit next to them in your pride? Do you feel like there's somebody there that you could say, hey, I'm really struggling, and I need help? And because, faith-based ministries often have people like me that just They will sit and listen with you. They will guide you. And some churches actually pay for people to have counseling and have scholarship programs and other ways of helping you get the help you need. If that's not an option, the next thing I would say is find a group that fits you. Somebody, and nobody has an excuse in this world today to not be in a group, because we have physical groups in your own hometown. And then there are all kinds of groups online where you can join with an avatar and just sit and listen. I have a friend that she's famous. She's like a live walking library of all the recovery groups she sat in with an avatar. She's never said a word, but she has absorbed a lot of other people's conversations. You might think, well, how functional is that? Here's the reality. When you're in a group setting, you're hearing someone else's pain and someone else say something that you're not willing to say yet, but it's striking your heart and it's
Right.
cutting you, and it's separating and dividing, you know, the things that you're unwilling to deal with. It's very hard to sit in a group atmosphere for too long and not experience some level of change. And you may not have even opened your mouth yet.
Yep.
So find a group, be a part of that, and let the process of release, of forgiveness, of letting go. Remember what I said. It's important for you to acknowledge, like Patti said, this was not all you. This was not all them. Often we're dealing with generational pain,
Yep.
handed down family to family member to family member. And until somebody pauses and owns that space and says, you know, I don't think I want this to go any further. I think I'm going to do the work. And they pray that breakup prayer. They say,
Yes.
I'm done. I want that space back. That space belongs to me. I may not have been affirmed as a child, but I have a right in my life as an adult to have people look at me and honor me and respect me, not make fun of me or tear me down, treat me angrily, control me, dominate me. That may have been your reality all the way up until that day. But the day that you own that and you say, listen, I know this is how my life has been, but I'm not going to be that person anymore. And you begin the journey that day of letting go and then letting in light, leaning in to the spaces in your own soul where you have need, you know, and do some of the, you know, the handout is going to have some shadow work, some actualization, some really good exercises, journaling prompts, things that you can do that will help you. And they're completely free.
Yep.
So we're really giving you the opportunity through this one broadcast, you know, the opportunity to pause and to reflect and to begin to own the space in you that ultimately belongs to you.
Yeah. The one thing I would say is when, you know, if you join these groups and you don't stop when things get hard, that's when you need the breakthrough. That's when you know you're in the right place. When you have that feeling inside of you that I can't do this anymore because of whatever reason, push through it. Because that's where you grow. That's where you heal. And it's easy to not go back to church or not, you know, when I started going to church, I went for a year by myself and just slid in and slid out until I knew it was for me. And then I met a world of people, including Faith, who helped me.
Yeah.
And I'm still friends with a majority of them today because of it, right? And we've helped each other even more through other things now. But doing this work, be honest in your journaling prompts. Don't sugarcoat it. And give yourself grace. I remember a couple of years ago, I called you just out of the blue from work because I had a
trauma response.
A trauma response to something. And you helped me work through it, right? And it was something as simple as wearing a uniform top, but it brought back trauma from when I was younger. And as I massaged throughout that day, I was able to work through it and release it and, you know, get the wisdom from God on, you know, it wasn't my fault.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's just such an awesome feeling when you can heal from it. And that's why I promote inner healing, you promote healing, and we've experienced it and we help others through it. So I want to thank you for coming on and sharing your wisdom, knowledge, and how people can heal from these wounds, because it's so important. I could tell story after story from the women that I've met through massaging them and just through groups and stuff that, some that their mother would get a call from the bar and say, he's on his way home, he's in a mean mood, get out of the house. And them sharing that they were out in the snow, in the cold, hiding for hours, the mother and the children, until he passed out, right? That's what creates. He may not have hit you, but the fear was there, right? And to heal from that stuff so that we can be around the male figures healthfully.
Yeah.
And trust them and trust us. And so I really thank you for part 2, the father wound. Part 3 will be coming up next month on sibling and friendship wounds. And so stay tuned for that. We'll be promoting that in August sometime. So thank you, everybody, for watching, listening. If you have any comments, questions, just put them in the chat. It'll come up on our feeds and we'll answer them. We'll put Faith's information in the feed. And you can always reach out to us on Facebook Messenger, through our emails, our phone numbers. And we're here to help you understand why you feel the way you do and heal from it so you can live out the rest of your life happy and whole.
Can I just say something as we close?
Yep.
Ephesians 2:10 in the Bible is, if you look at it in a couple of translations, one of them says, we are God's masterpiece. We are his masterpiece, created in Christ Jesus for good and beautiful and wholesome and lovely things in this life. So if life has not been good for you and you're angry about that, I want to promise you that you have not seen all that God has for you. And it also says, and I think it's in the Message translation, it says that the making and the saving of the masterpiece is his work. So I want to encourage you, ask for help. Ask him for help. You might say, well, I already have. I already done the cry out to God thing. Ask again.
Yep.
Because I promise you, if you've asked, he's doing something in your life and you may not understand it. You may say it's not fast enough. It's not happening the way I think it should. But there is never a time that you haven't cried out to God, that he hasn't heard you and answered your cry. Read Psalm 107. The whole entire chapter of Psalm 107 is all about God answering the cry of people that, that cry out to him and saving them and delivering them out of all their troubles. So don't try to do it alone. If you're gonna dig into this afresh, ask God for help and accept that there might actually be more to you than you've accepted for yourself.
And part of the father wound is your relationship with God, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you don't feel you have a good relationship with God, it can be part of your father wound because you didn't have a good relationship with him. I remember you helping me work through that and seeing that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, until you, every person, Christian sitting in church for 40 years, if you still have anger or some sort of something around your earthly father, I promise you that is taking up space that belongs to God. And it's like wearing a pair of dirty, dirty, dirty glasses. You can see through it. You can see God, but you really can't accurately see him because those feelings you have about your earthly dad are actually getting in the way. So even for you, this is worth that work. You will discover something about the Father that you've maybe heard people say, but you just couldn't feel it. You couldn't grasp it in your soul. Your mind, it seemed too big for your mind to hold on to.
Yep. So, there's many ways, to overcome this wound, and we gave you a few suggestions tonight. So we hope you found this enlightening, helpful, and again, reach out if you have any questions. And we just thank you for watching. So have a good night, and we'll see you next month.